My name is Waqas bin Saeed. I was born in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in a home filled with comfort, faith, and social respect. My father was a successful businessman known for his honesty, while my mother was a woman of deep faith and quiet strength. For most of my childhood, I lived surrounded by ease and admiration, but fate took a sudden turn. My father passed away before I reached adulthood. His death left not just a financial gap, but an emotional one that no amount of wealth could fill. My mother became my guardian, teacher, and anchor. She carried herself with the dignity of a queen even when loneliness hollowed her nights. With patience, she managed the business and made sure I lacked nothing. People often told her, "Your son is blessed, he'll make you proud." Outwardly, it looked true. I grew into a confident young man, educated, disciplined, and respected. But behind my polite smile and social grace, something inside me remained empty. It was a strange kind of emptiness, one I couldn't name. At night, when the city lights of Jeddah shimmered outside my window, I would lie awake and feel a silence crawling inside my chest. I had everything the world admired: a successful business, friends, comfort, yet I felt incomplete. It was as though my soul was thirsty for something beyond success and luxury. I began to ask myself questions I couldn't answer. What am I really searching for? Why does peace seem so far away? My mother noticed my distant eyes and often said, "Son, sometimes the heart wanders when it forgets who it belongs to." I would nod, pretending to understand, but in truth I didn't. My faith was intact, my life disciplined, yet my inner world felt like a deserted city. That emptiness followed me everywhere. In business meetings, in gatherings, even during prayer. It was like living with a shadow that refused to leave. I wanted to fill it with meaning, but I didn't know where to look. I was waiting, unknowingly, for something or someone to change everything. And that change came unexpectedly, not through wisdom or worship, but through a conversation that should have ended as idle talk. A friend from my past appeared again, carrying with him not advice, but temptation disguised as experience. I didn't know then that a single evening's laughter would lead me to the darkest, most transformative journey of my life. It happened on an ordinary afternoon in a coffee shop near the Corniche. I was sitting alone, scrolling through business emails, when an old friend from school, Hamid, appeared out of nowhere. He looked the same, confident, mischievous, and always chasing excitement. We greeted each other with laughter and memories, and soon our conversation turned toward life, travel, and what he called the pleasures that make a man feel alive. "Waqas," he said, leaning closer, "you're too serious. You've spent your life between home and business. You need to see the world, feel it." I smiled politely. "And where do you suggest I go?" "I've been to Dubai, Istanbul, Kuala Lumpur." He chuckled, shaking his head. No, not like that. You need to go somewhere different. Go to Iran." "Iran?" I frowned. "What's there for me?" Hamid grinned, lowering his voice. "Have you ever heard of Nikah-e-Muta? Temporary marriage, legal, easy, and unforgettable. You choose how long it lasts. A day, a week, a month. The women there are graceful, mature, and know how to make you forget the world." His words hit me like a spark in dry grass. I laughed it off, pretending not to care, but something in his tone stayed with me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words temporary marriage echoed again and again. It felt sinful, yes, but there was also something hypnotic about the idea, a kind of escape from the monotony that had wrapped around my soul. For days, I fought the thought. My upbringing, my mother's faith, and the teachings of my childhood all stood like walls in front of me. But inside those walls, desire whispered softly, "It's not wrong. It's allowed. You're not harming anyone." Hamid messaged me again a week later. "I can give you contacts. It's simple. Go for business and no one will question you." That message became the first step toward my undoing. I told my mother I had to travel for a new business opportunity. She smiled with pride, kissed my forehead, and prayed for my safety. Her blessings followed me to the airport, unaware that I was walking straight into a trap woven with charm and shadows. As the plane took off, I looked out of the window at the fading lights of Jeddah. My heart was divided, part of me ashamed, part of me thrilled. I didn't know that the journey I was beginning in search of pleasure would end as a battle between life, death, and the soul itself. The first breath of Tehran's cold air struck me like an omen. The city was vast, ancient, and unfamiliar, its streets humming with strangers who spoke a language I barely understood. I checked into a modest hotel downtown, trying to look like a businessman on an ordinary trip. Yet inside, my pulse beat with nervous excitement. I told myself I was only exploring, nothing more, but I knew that was a lie. The next morning, Hamid's contact, a man named Reza, came to meet me. He looked sharp and polite, dressed in a grey suit and a warm smile. "Welcome, my friend from Jeddah," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Iran is a land of hospitality. Whatever you need, I will arrange." I hesitated before asking the question that had brought me here. "You know, the special kind of arrangement?" Reza's smile widened knowingly. "Of course, Nikah Emuta, very common here. We respect our guests. Tell me what kind of woman you prefer." The words felt heavy on my tongue. I could have walked away right then. I could have left the temptation unfulfilled. But instead, I heard myself saying, "Someone older, graceful, experienced, someone who brings peace, not noise." He nodded. "Then I know just the person." That evening, I was taken to a quiet neighborhood where the air smelled faintly of jasmine and wood smoke. Reza led me to a small, tastefully furnished apartment. When the door opened, I saw her for the first time. Zainab. She was perhaps in her early 40s, draped in a deep green shawl. Time had drawn delicate lines on her face, but instead of aging her, they gave her a strange, magnetic dignity. Her eyes were the kind that could see through silence, calm, mysterious, and unreadable. Reza introduced us briefly, and after the formalities of the Mutta were completed, he left us alone. I sat across from her, unsure of what to say. She broke the silence first. "You look tense," she said softly, her accent lilting. "You've come searching for something, haven't you?" Her voice was gentle, almost musical. I nodded vaguely, not trusting my words. That night, as we spoke for hours, I felt an unexpected peace, as though she understood the emptiness I'd carried all these years. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not judged. I thought I had found comfort, but beneath her soothing presence, something unseen stirred, something that watched, waited, and whispered that peace always has a price. The first week with Zainab felt like a strange dream, gentle, soothing, and disorienting all at once. Her calm voice filled the quiet evenings. She would pour tea, speak softly about life, and listen as if every word I said mattered. Her apartment smelled of rose water and burning incense. At times, I forgot that what we shared was temporary, a contract with an expiration date. It felt almost sacred, until the change began. It started subtly. One morning, I woke with a dull ache in my body and a heaviness I couldn't explain. I blamed the cold Tehran weather, but the next day it was worse. My head throbbed, my hands shook, and every movement felt like walking through fog. Even my appetite vanished. I'd sit at the table, staring at food I couldn't taste. Zainab noticed it, of course. "You're tired," she said, pressing a cool hand to my forehead. "You should rest." Her touch was soft, her concern genuine, yet something about the way she smiled made my heart beat uneasily. Days passed. My reflection in the mirror began to change. My skin had lost its color, my eyes looked hollow, and dark circles deepened under them. I looked like someone drained of life. "Maybe it's the air," I told myself, forcing a laugh. "Or maybe homesickness." But the voice inside whispered something else. "You're being consumed." At night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd hear faint sounds from Zainab's room. Murmurs, rhythmic like chanting. The first time, I brushed it off as her prayers. But sometimes, the sounds turned sharp, unfamiliar, like words from a forgotten tongue. And every time they stopped, an unnatural stillness filled the house. One evening, while pouring tea, I caught her watching me. Her gaze was calm but too steady, like someone studying rather than caring. "You look weaker today," she said. "Maybe you should stay in bed tonight." Her words sent a chill through me. There was warmth in her tone, but her eyes were cold. That night, as she turned off the lights and whispered good night, I lay awake, my body trembling, my mind racing. I wanted to believe she cared. I wanted to believe I wasn't losing my mind. But as my strength continued to fade, I couldn't shake the thought that Zainab's tenderness hid something else, something dark, ancient, and hungry. I didn't know it yet, but I was no longer just her guest. I was her prisoner, slowly dying in a cage made of silk and smiles. By the second week, my body had turned into a battlefield. I could barely climb the stairs without losing breath. My chest tightened each morning as though invisible hands pressed against it. I spent hours lying still, afraid to sleep and terrified to stay awake. The doctor I visited in Tehran examined me with confusion, his brow furrowing deeper with every test. "You're young," he said finally, "but your body is reacting like an old man's. There's weakness in your blood, loss of energy. Are you under stress or consuming something unusual?" I hesitated before replying, "No, nothing unusual, just living with someone." He gave me a strange look, then said softly, "Be careful whom you live with. Sometimes what drains us isn't illness but presence." Those words followed me home. That night I decided to stay awake. I told Zainab I felt tired and needed to rest early, then lay in bed pretending to sleep. Hours passed. The only sound was the faint ticking of a clock. Then I heard the creak of a floorboard. My heart thudded. I lifted my eyelids just enough to see her silhouette moving across the room. She walked to the old cupboard, opened it, and took out a small clay bowl. From inside, she pulled dry herbs and something that glimmered faintly, perhaps metal or glass. Then, in a voice low and ancient, she began to chant. The words were nothing like Arabic or Persian I had ever heard. They were heavy, echoing, like a forgotten language carved in stone. The air in the room thickened. A strange fragrance rose, sharp and sweet, like something burning yet alive. The shadows seemed to shift with her voice. My body shivered as I lay frozen beneath the blanket. After several minutes, she poured a drop of something from the bowl into a cup, murmured a final word, and blew over it. The lights flickered. Then, as quietly as she had begun, she placed everything back and slipped into bed beside me as if nothing had happened. My heart pounded so hard I thought she would hear it. I lay still, eyes shut, until dawn broke through the curtains. At breakfast, I gathered the courage to ask, "Zainab, what were you doing last night?" She paused, smiled faintly, and said, "You must have been dreaming, Waqas. You need more rest." Her words were calm, but the lie in her eyes was sharp as a blade. From that moment, sleep became my enemy. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear her whispering in that strange tongue, feeding something unseen. And for the first time, I was certain I wasn't just losing my strength, I was being taken piece by piece. The night after witnessing Zainab's strange ritual, I couldn't bear to stay indoors. Her calm smile and cold eyes haunted me. Every word she spoke now sounded like part of a disguise. By morning, I decided to leave the house and wander the streets, desperate to think clearly. Tehran's winter air bit into my lungs, but it felt better than the suffocating warmth of her apartment. I stopped by a small tea shop where the smell of cardamom and smoke filled the air. The old shopkeeper greeted me kindly and asked where I was from. When I mentioned Jeddah, he smiled, until I told him where I was staying. "Ah," he said softly, his face darkening. "That neighborhood." He hesitated before finishing. "Be careful who you trust there." His words stirred unease. I pressed further. "Do you know a woman named Zainab?" He froze. His eyes darted toward the door before leaning closer. "My friend, if you value your life, leave that house. She's been there many years. Men come to her for temporary marriage, but they never stay long. Some fall ill, others vanish. She's cursed, or worse." I felt my stomach twist. "Cursed? How?" He shook his head. "We don't ask questions about her. But old people say she was once part of a family of sorcerers near Qom. They practice Siyah Amal, dark rituals. Since then, she lives alone. No family, no friends, only visitors." And their silence afterward, I left the shop trembling. The city looked different now, not beautiful, but haunted. When I reached the apartment, every corner seemed to whisper. That night, I waited for her to fall asleep before searching the cupboard again. My hands shook as I pulled it open. Behind folded clothes lay a small wooden box. Inside were strange objects, tiny jars of dried herbs, folded talismans, burnt papers marked with symbols I couldn't understand. One piece of parchment was covered in faded writing, half Arabic, half Persian. But the words felt alive, pulsing beneath my fingertips. Suddenly a voice came from behind me. "Waqas, what are you doing?" I turned sharply. Zainab stood at the doorway, her hair loose, her eyes shimmering like molten glass. I stammered, I was just looking for... She walked closer, her tone low but chilling. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Then she smiled faintly, not with warmth but with warning. That night I didn't sleep at all. For the first time, I realized I might not leave Iran alive. That night's discovery shattered the thin shell of denial I had been living inside. I couldn't pretend anymore that Zainab was simply a mysterious woman with a troubled past. The box of talismans, the secret rituals, the withering of my body. Everything pointed to one truth: something unnatural bound her to darkness. But what terrified me more was why. The next evening, I found her sitting silently by the window. The curtains swayed in the cold wind and the dim lamp cast half her face in shadow. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "Zainab, I know there's something you're hiding. If you want me to live, tell me the truth." She didn't move at first. Then, with a sigh heavy as regret, she said, "You should never have come here, Waqas." I stepped closer. "Then why did you let me?" Her eyes glistened. "Because I was told to." My heart skipped a beat. "Told? By whom?" Her gaze drifted toward the floor. "By them, the ones you can't see." Her voice trembled now, almost human again. "I was raised by a woman who practiced the dark arts. After my parents died, she took me in. Not out of love, but to use me. She taught me how to draw energy from the living. To survive, she said, I must feed on others' vitality. Every man I married, I killed slowly without ever meaning to. I am not free, Waqas. I'm bound." Her words hit like thunder. I stared at her, torn between fear and pity. She wiped her tears, but they kept falling. "When I met you, I wanted to stop. I prayed that maybe this time it would be different. But the night you arrived, I started feeling their pull again. Those unseen masters, they command me to take what they want, and if I refuse..." She stopped mid-sentence, clutching her chest as if in pain. I whispered, "If they control you, then we'll fight them together." "There must be a way." Zainab shook her head. "You don't understand. No one who has tried to help me has survived." For the first time, I saw something break inside her. Not wickedness, but despair. The woman I had once feared now looked like a prisoner in her own body. As I turned to leave the room, her voice trembled behind me. "If you stay, you will die. But if you go, they will follow." That night, I realized the truth. Evil wasn't always born of choice. Sometimes, it was inherited like a curse that love alone could never break. After her confession, the world around me seemed to tilt. I couldn't decide whether to run or to stay. Zainab's eyes carried both guilt and grief. A storm of someone trapped between sin and survival. But my body was failing fast, and if I didn't act soon, I knew I would die in that cursed apartment. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed and walked through the narrow streets until I reached a small mosque. My legs trembled with every step. Inside, the air was still and sacred. An old imam sat in the corner, reciting softly from the Quran. I waited until he finished, then told him in broken words, "I am trapped with a woman who uses dark powers. My strength is leaving me." He looked at me calmly, as though he had heard such pain before. "My son," he said, "evil feeds on fear. Darkness grows when you stop calling light by its name. Read Ayat al-Kursi every night, read Surah Al-Baqarah, and never stop believing that Allah's word is stronger than any whisper of jinn or magic." His voice gave me strength. I returned home that evening with trembling hands but a firm heart. Zainab was sitting on the sofa, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "Where were you?" she asked softly. "At a place where light still exists," I replied. That night, when the clock struck 2, she rose again, just as before. She walked toward the cupboard, opened it, and took out the clay bowl. But this time, before she could begin, I recited Ayat al-Kursi aloud. My voice shook, yet the sound filled the room with an energy I hadn't felt in weeks. Zainab froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Then she screamed, a cry that was not entirely human. The air around us thickened, and shadows began to swirl in the corners of the room. The lamp flickered violently, then burst, throwing sparks across the wall. "Stop," she shouted. "You don't know what you're summoning." But I didn't stop. I continued to recite, louder this time, until my voice echoed through every corner of the house. The bowl fell from her hands and shattered. Smoke rose from the ground, black and heavy. Something within that smoke hissed like a serpent. I could feel it, a presence, angry and ancient. Zainab fell to her knees, clutching her head. Waqas, you're killing us both. But I knew what the Imam had said. Evil feeds on fear, so I stood firm. If we die free, I said. For the first time, she didn't resist. Her tears flowed as she whispered, then let light decide who deserves to live. That was the moment our battle truly began, not between man and woman, but between faith and the unseen. The air that night was charged with something unseen, like the pause before lightning strikes. Zainab and I both sensed it, we just didn't speak of it. I could barely stand without shaking, yet something deeper than fear kept me rooted. The Imam's words echoed in my mind. Darkness grows only when you stop calling light by its name. As the clock struck midnight, the wind outside howled like a living thing. The lamp flickered once, twice, then went out. Zainab's breath grew uneven. She whispered, "It's starting again." I could see her silhouette trembling, her hands pressed against her ears, as if she was hearing voices I could not. Then it came, a sound so deep it seemed to rise from beneath the floor. A growl, thick and human, yet not. The air turned colder. I began reciting Ayat al-Kursi again, my voice hoarse but steady. The shadows in the corners of the room began to twist and shift like living smoke. "Stop!" Zainab screamed. "They'll kill you if you don't stop." But I had crossed the point of fear. I shouted louder, my words breaking through the thick, heavy air. The unseen force responded with violence. The furniture rattled, the window shattered, and a burst of icy wind blew through the room. Zainab fell to her knees, sobbing. "They're here, Waqas. They won't let me go." I knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Then fight. Not with their language, with the truth you've been denying. You said you can't be free, but no power is greater than the one who made us." She looked up at me, her eyes, once dark and haunted, now wide with terror and something like faith, struggling to be born. Together we began reciting. Her voice shook at first, tangled with fear, but soon it grew stronger, blending with mine. The shadows screamed, the air convulsed. I felt as though something was tearing away from her, like invisible chains snapping one by one. The sound of the growl turned into a shriek, and then silence. The room went still, the lamp flickered back to life, and the smoke that had filled the corners dissolved. Zainab collapsed in my arms, trembling but alive. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It's gone. I can feel it. After all these years, I can finally breathe." My own tears fell freely. I looked toward the cracked window where the first light of dawn was breaking. The night was over, but part of me knew, some darkness leaves quietly only to test your faith again. When dawn finally broke over Tehran, the room felt different. Not haunted, not heavy, just still. The silence was no longer oppressive but sacred, like the air after a storm. Zainab sat beside me on the floor, her face pale yet peaceful. For the first time, her eyes no longer hid a secret. She looked human, fragile, almost reborn. "Waqas," she said quietly, "you've given me back my soul. I don't know how to thank you." I shook my head weakly. "Don't thank me. Thank the one who heard us both." For the next few days, I remained in her house to recover. My strength returned slowly, as though life itself was pouring back into me. The dark circles under my eyes began to fade. Zainab too was changing. The woman who had once moved like a shadow now opened the windows each morning and let the light flood in. She cooked, prayed, and smiled with a kind of hesitant freedom, as though she was learning to live all over again. But I knew it couldn't last. "I have to leave soon," I told her one morning. "My mother is waiting. She thinks I came for business." Zainab nodded, her expression calm but wistful. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "Tell people what you saw. Tell them not to chase desires that lead into darkness. Tell them that no sin is worth your soul, I promised." When the day came to leave, she walked me to the door. The sunlight touched her face and she smiled softly. "Maybe one day we'll meet again, not in darkness, but in peace." Those were the last words she said to me. When I stepped off the plane in Jeddah, My heart felt heavier than my luggage. My mother ran to me, tears in her eyes, and gasped at how pale and thin I had become. I told her I had been sick, nothing more. But each night, when the city slept, I would remember Zainab's trembling voice, her tears, and the moment the shadows had vanished. Weeks turned into months. I began visiting the mosque more often, reading, praying, and helping at community gatherings. My friends said I had changed, quieter, steadier, more grateful. They were right. I had gone to Iran seeking pleasure and returned with wisdom carved from pain. I had looked into the face of darkness and found that even there, light can live, if you dare to call its name. Sometimes, before dawn, I still whisper her name in prayer, not out of love, but mercy. Because Zainab taught me that redemption isn't found in running from sin, it's found in surviving it.